we been? We're still in Lent. We've been doing these stories from the desert. I was far away recently, and y'all were blessed by the work of Kelsey in the back there, hey, and Jeremiah sitting more in front, yay. Thank you for your hard work. I trust that it was amazing. I can't wait to hear about it. But we have our last story from the desert this week. So if we're going to be in Exodus 32 together. Don't quite switch the slide yet, but if you brought a physical Bible or a digital Bible, you can open it now. The context of this particular story is God's people have been going across the desert, walk, going through all these things. They finally made it to the mountain. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's a giant cloud. It's crazy, and God invites all the people up to come and meet him on the mountain. And they say, no, we're good. I don't think so. Instead, we'll just send Moses. So Moses goes up the mountain by himself instead of all the people to meet God. And he's been up there quite some time, talking to God. He's getting blueprints for the tabernacle. He's receiving the law. He's spending time up there. And Exodus 32 is this fun little pan back down to see what's happening at the bottom of the mountain. So feel free to read along with me or listen, whatever your vibe is. But we are in Exodus 32, verse 1. I'm reading from my translation. The people saw that Moshe lagged descending from the mountain. The people gathered to Aharon. They said to him, arise, make gods for us, that will walk before our face. For this man Moshe, who raised us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what will happen to him. Aharon said to them, break off the rings of gold from the ears of your women and your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. All the people broke off the rings of gold from their ears. They brought them to Aharon. He took it from their hands. He created with the stylus. He made a poured out calf. They said, Yisrael, these are your gods who raised you from the land of Egypt. Aharon saw it. He built a slaughtering place before the calf. Aharon called out and said, a celebration for Yahweh tomorrow. They rose early the next day. They sent up burnt things. They drew near with peace. The people sat to eat and drink. They arose to laugh. Yahweh said to Moshe, go descend, for your people whom you raised from the land of Egypt are ruining. They have quickly turned aside from the path that I commanded them. They made for themselves a poured out calf. They bowed themselves to it. They slaughtered things to it. They said, these are your gods, Yisrael, who raised you up from the land of Egypt. Yahweh said to Moshe, I have seen this people. Look here, a people of hard necks. Now let me rest. Oh, that my anger would burn in them. Oh, that I might eat them. I will make of you a great nation. Moshe became sick before the face of Yahweh his God. He said, why, Yahweh, does your anger burn in your people whom you brought out from the land of Egypt, and great power and a strong hand? Why will Egypt say, in evil he brought them out to kill them in the mountains, to finish them upon the face of the dirt? Turn from the heat of your anger, be comforted from the evil for the sake of your people. Remember Abraham, Yitzchak, Yisrael, your servants to whom you swore yourself. You spoke to them. I will make you great in number, your children as the stars of the sky. All this land that I have said that will be for your children, they will inherit it for eternity. That is our reading this morning. If you've never read the Bible before, welcome. It's fun in here. There's a lot going on. So before we even get into the main points of what I want to talk about, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is, whoa, God says he wants to eat people. What is happening? That's not in the usual translation. Probably says something like consume. God wants to eat people. What's going on? Is God really going to eat the Hebrews? Let's talk about it. This is both my interpretation, but also the traditional Jewish interpretation that has held for a couple thousand of years. So is he really angry? Is he really going to eat them? If you know Moses, if you know the story of Moshe, the first time we meet him, he murders a guy and buries him in the sand. It actually says he buries him in the sand alive, and then he dies. Throughout the whole story, we have Moses encountering his people and then talking to God and being like, these people, I can't believe that you gave me these ones. Why are they like this? Please, I want to be all done with them. let me die, let them die, I don't care either way. This is Moses throughout the whole story. And so in this particular spot, God is doing something that enables Moses to hear what's already in his own heart. It's like if your spouse comes home from work and they're like, my job, my boss, my manager, whatever it is, and your spouse says, or you say, yeah, you should quit your job. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, no, like this actually has really good benefits and I really like my coworkers, and like the job market's terrible. And then your spouse says, and that's the conversation, right? That when you hear it said out loud, what is you're kind of hiding away in your heart, you realize how it sounds, and you go, oh, maybe not. So God says these things to Moses. We actually see it in the text specifically that God creates space for Moshe to move into this role of caretaker, intercessor, and protector, because it's in the Hebrew. If you look at the story, or don't, just believe me either way. God speaks twice. It says, and then God said, hey, this is what the people are doing. And then there's blank. And then again it says, Yahweh spoke to Moshe saying. So that's not necessary. It could have just been one long monologue. Why is it two? It's because, both grammatically and in Jewish tradition, he says that, and then there's an awkward space. There's time for Moses to say, I care about the people, or I don't know, maybe you should burn them up. He doesn't say anything. And so Moses, as he departs from that spot, he sets aside his authority, his privilege of communicating with God and interceding for the people. That's when God escalates and says, okay, you got nothing to say? Great, let's eat them. Let's just do away with this people. That space is there to call Moses into that spot that he's not occupying, of caretaker, of intercessor, of protector. He even uses specific language to remind Moses who he really is. We've seen this word eating recently in the text. It's the first time God encounters Moses, or Moses encounters God in the text. It's from a bush. And what's notable about that bush, it is in fire, but it is not eaten. We read that a couple weeks ago. So the first time Moses meets God, God is saying, I'm the God who can be fire, who can be this dangerous, destructive presence, and yet I choose not to be. And so God uses this language to remind Moses of what his character is. And in that space, Moses does say, wait, no, don't do this. This isn't who you are. This isn't the promise. This isn't what you've said you're going to do. So there's an invitation, there's a challenge in there today. Can we move from the spot of saying, the church today, where are we at? Christian nationalism, turning aside from what the love of Jesus actually is supposed to look like in the world. You know, evangelical megachurches, whatever it is that specifically pushes our buttons. Can we, in that space, move out of just angry bystander mode into this pause from God, into being caretakers, intercessors, protectors, both of our faith, but also the church? There is a little question in there for us today. But now we're going to find ourselves in the story. Wherever we are in our story, we're probably with one of the four characters in this story. So some of us really find ourselves in the frustration of God. We're out there, we're in the churches, we're on social media, we're seeing what's going down, we're seeing that kind of things that are said, that are put with the label of the Bible or Christianity on it, and we are mad, we are angry. How could these people have lost the plot so much? How could they have turned aside from what we're supposed to be doing, what we've been supposed to be doing the whole time? And so maybe when we hear God say, I'm going to eat them, we're like, yeah, let's start over. We don't need that. Let's do a new path. Let's do a new destiny. I'll be the new Abraham. It'll be great. I'll be the new set of people. So if we find ourselves in that frustration, in that angst, there is an antidote. It is not my belief that that anger is what God has for you for forever, that that's not just a healthy place to occupy all the time. We have prophetic anger. We have some prophetic justice and righteousness that can lead us to frustration, and yet that's not the landing place that we want for all time. Instead, even in the story right after Moses talks to God, it says that God relents from the things which he said that he was going to do. Another little note from the text that he wasn't actually going to do it, because it says he said that he was going to do those things. So if we remember who God actually is, if we remember that God is not a God of destruction but creation, that God is not about destroying but forgiving and beginning again and beginning anew, that helps us as we engage with the world. That helps us when we engage with the church. That helps us when we feel like we're the only ones left in all of creation who haven't lost the plot. God has been here the whole time, and he's faithful, and who he is always remaking, always doing things anew, keeping a track on the same trajectory, and his promises are that at the end of all time, it is love that wins, it is justice that wins, it's mercy that wins, and that's where we're going. So we are not the people who take up weapons against one another. We're people who trust in God's character and his promises. So that's our antidote when we find ourselves in the frustration of God. Next, some of us find ourselves in the confusion of Moshe. We've been having a grand old time in our corner with Jesus. Everything feels pretty good, actually. We have an understanding worked out, me and God, everything's great. We're having our special quiet time, we're having our prayer, everything's going well. And then we pop out of our holy huddle and feel totally lost. What is even going on? What are these people doing? What is even right? What is God even up to in the world? There's a lot going on. If we all didn't notice in the news, in our community, in the broader community, national community, global community. So what happens in the rest of the story that we don't quite have time to fully unpack is that Moses hears from God that God has relented. And yet when he comes down the mountain, Moses is going to embark on some Moses side quests. So a lot of the time, if we're reading Tanakh, if we're reading the Old Testament, we can get bored or confused because it's like, and then God said this, and then Moses said this, and then God said this, and so Moses said this. And it's very repetitive because we have the faithfulness of Moses written down for us that he did exactly what God told him to do. There is no mention after God says that he's relenting of God speaking in the rest of this chapter. So Moses comes down the mountain and he grinds up the golden calf into powder and he makes everybody drink it. And that's only the start of his rage quit or rage re-engage. And after he does that, that's when he says, oh, that I might find atonement for you. So some of us find ourselves with Moses being like, I don't need them to be all the way destroyed, but I do need them to be punished. And then after they get punished, after they've had to reckon with the terribleness of who they are, what they did, then we can have atonement. Then we can have the blood of Jesus. Then we can have the family of God in Christ. But first, they need to hear my truth. First, they need to pay, right? However, that's not who God is. That's not the God of this story. The God of this story remembers his promises and says who he is, right? And then doesn't do all that. And yet, sometimes with Moses, we take up this punitive, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, and then after that, I'll forgive you. That's not the way that Jesus tells us. This is what's offensive about the gospel, is that when Jesus comes, he doesn't just come for the oppressed and the marginalized, though he does that first. He then also heals and forgives the Roman centurions, right? That's the part of the gospel that makes us uncomfortable and so, but really those people, surely I should get to mete out what I think is right first, and then Jesus can forgive them. But no, Jesus and God, Jesus is God, oh, little heresy. Jesus has already accomplished his grace and redemption, especially for us in our timeline, right? And so we don't get to decide when somebody gets grace and forgiveness from us. Does that mean that we never truth tell? No, we're about to get to that next point. But even when we are truth telling, it's coming not from a place of extraction and punishing, right? Because none of us have known everything and been absolutely perfect and had all the right positions on these doctrines, on these hot button issues, on these postures, on the way that we're supposed to treat with people. And God did not punish us for that. And so it is up to us to re-find that forgiveness, walking in the Spirit, and be able to dole that out to the people we meet, remembering that grace is free, remembering that we have been forgiven, and letting the God of justice be the one to work things out in his own time, however God chooses to work that out. Some of us find ourselves in the mix of care and apathy with Aharon. So if we look at the story, the people, this is Aaron's idea to make the calf, by the way. They make it, and then the people say, this is our God who brought us out of Egypt. And Moses, I don't know, Aaron seems to go, oh, and so he says, this is a celebration for Yahweh. He's trying to re-steer everybody back onto the path. He said, sure, we can have a calf. And then they said, great, let's worship the calf. And he said, but let's make it about Yahweh again. We can get this back together. So you can read this in two ways, which are really the same. It can be read as apathetic people-pleasing. The people-pleasers here say, apathetic people-pleasing? That doesn't exist. What do you mean? It's because I care about people that I people-please. No. Apathy says what is true, what they actually need, isn't really important. What is true is what they want, right? If I can just check the box, they'll appreciate me, they'll love me, they'll see me, they'll stop whining, whatever it is, whatever kind of posture we're coming from. People-pleasing says it doesn't matter what is true, what is actually needed, I'll just do what you want. And that's why it's apathetic. So you can read it that way, of he's just trying to get everybody on board, he doesn't really care, so he's people-pleasing. Or you can read it that he wants so much for them not to do the bad thing that they're doing, even though he empowered them doing it, that he's willing to say, you do you, right? That is the gospel of the secular gospel of the 21st century is you do you, right? And we know that it's not always good if you have your teenager, they come home from school and all they want to do then is log on to a game or to the internet and stay on them until 3 a.m. and neglect their homework. We don't say, you do you, bud, that's great. We know that there's something true, which is that screens are not always great, and we need to help kids do homework, and they need to move their bodies and be outside and be in community, and we know all these other things are true. And so instead of saying, you do you, man, we say, hey, the truth matters. I want to engage in this with you, even when it's uncomfortable, because I care about you, because I'm not apathetic. That shows up in parenting, but it can also show up in community, right? You do you. We can say like, oh, my friend decided to start sports gambling because he can quit his job. He reads all the sports tweets. It's going to go great. No, we don't say you do you. We say keep your job. Gambling industry, you're like, please don't do this. Don't do that to your family. Let's talk. And so for some of us, we need to find that antidote. We need to remember, whether we're talking to ourselves or others, that people-pleasing is really not engaged care. It's not helpful. Now, there are times when telling the truth isn't appropriate, that they haven't asked us into that place in our lives, where in fact it would just be confrontational and unhelpful to be like, hey, absolutely. Please don't just walk up to a random parent and be like, I don't think you're parenting very well. I'm truth telling, and that's loving. Great, thank you. We have to wait and also listen to the Spirit and be asked into those places, those positions. Sometimes people have decided to truth tell to us when we have not asked for it and they don't have a place of honor in our lives. And we felt that disconnect, and you can tell that's off. So, if you're not Aharon, if you're not in a place to have that conversation, probably don't try. But let's make sure we're moving out of true care and knowledge of what is truly good, and not just sitting back because it's more comfortable, or sitting back because we think it'll make them happy in the short term, and that's good enough. So some of us find ourselves with Aharon, but a whole bunch of us probably also find ourselves in the disorientation of the people. A little empathy for the people here. God showed up on the top of like what seems like a volcano. There's a lot of booms, there's a lot of lightning, there's a lot of cloud, there's a lot of chaos, and it's in that context that God is, and then your guy goes into it, and he's gone for over a month. Like, well, doesn't seem like it's worked out really well for Moses. Time to pivot. Time to figure out what we're going to do. I can understand that. Maybe you guys can too. So when they make a calf, the way that I was raised, lullaby effect, was kind of just like, yeah, you know, people want idols. The heart is an idol factory. Luther, blah, 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 blah. And so they looked around and squinted and said, what should we make an idol of to worship? I know. A cow. We have lots of cows around. However, they just walked out of Egypt, right? Their place of trauma is Egypt. The place where they learned about the cosmos and who God is and who they are is Egypt. And in Egypt, there is a cow deity. There's a couple, but this specific one is named Apis. And Apis is a mediator god who exists to mediate between the people and the creator God. So could it be that Moses, the guy who they said, we don't want to go up the mountain, but you can. Now their mediator is gone, the person who is going to talk to God on their behalf, because talking to God is scary for them and perhaps even for us. And so they build a calf. They build a mediator and they say, God can talk through this thing instead. This thing can talk to God. That way I don't have to do it. Why do we like these kinds of barriers? Why do we like these kinds of idols? Because they help us to dodge our uncertainty, right? Where's Moses? Who knows? Where is God leading us? Who knows? You know what I can know? This calf. I can look at it. I can touch it. This calf is here. And why do we not like uncertainty? Because we like control. So we have all sorts of things that we set up to be our mediators instead of golden calves. Who knows? Maybe you do have a golden cow in your home. I haven't been there. That would be surprising, but impressive, perhaps. However, for most of us, our mediators look like, for some of us, doctrine, right? I don't have to actually talk to God because I have this perfect list of who God is, and so I can just commune with those. I'm not comfortable with Jesus, but I'm comfortable with love. So I'll just think about the fact that God is love, and I'll check that off of my to-do list of like, God loves me, the end, without actually talking to God, right? For some of us, the mediator can be the Bible. I don't have to have a relationship with God because I study the Bible, or I listen to TikToks of people who study the Bible, or I listen to podcasts, or I read books. And that way we don't actually have to talk to God. We have this mediator. For some of us who grew up in church, church is the mediator. I don't have to have an actual relationship with God because I go to the place and I check the box and somebody talks to me about God, and that's good enough for me. All of that is something we can control, something we can turn off and turn on again, and yet it is not the same as having a relationship with the living God. And it can be partially life-giving, but it's not the source of life. And we see in the story, the things they do are good, other than making the calf. They sit down, they wake up early, they have a good meal, it says they bring burnt offerings, they bring peace offerings, they get up, they party, they laugh. All of these are good things. It's not that they get up and like have an orgy or something. They instead do good things. However, these were the things that God had already invited them into. That's the tragedy, is he invited them up the mountain to eat and drink with him, with the presence of God himself. The floor got turned into sapphire. The table was laid. Everybody got to party with literally God on Mount Sinai. The Sanhedrin, the 70, ended up going up and doing that. But this is what God invited them to. And so often we choose a shadow of the good thing, the hint of the good thing, instead of the fullness of the good thing with God. We settle for what is less, what still checks the box, without actually experiencing this relationship with God. And so the antidote is pursuing actually the living God and saying, here I am. What is it that you would have me to know? Who are you? Who am I? I want to encounter you. And we've talked about different ways to do that, and we'll do that again around the corner eventually. But if you find yourself here realizing, oh, I have a really controlled relationship relationship with God. I have really specific ways, and I'm okay with meeting God, and that is it. We can talk about that together. We can talk to God about that. We can talk about it in the context of worship. But let's do our takeaways. Today's takeaways. We can move beyond the posture of angered bystander by taking responsibility and moving into the posture of caretaker, intercessor, and protector. That's the thing, right? Taking responsibility. You have no responsibility for the place of the church, for the place of our faith, for our community, if we just get to sit back in our armchairs and say, oh, if only everybody was as right as I was. Oh, if everyone just knew the things that I knew about God, the Bible, and Jesus, or the way we're supposed to be doing. That posture of irritated, scoffing, better than, doesn't take responsibility, right? It pulls itself off to the side and points. In the prophets, it actually says that God, once we take away our pointing, is when we can move forward in the paths of justice, and our light will become like the light of the sun. Posture of caretaker, intercessor, and protector is hard, but it's what God calls Moshe into, even in the context of his anger, his frustration, at times his rage, murderously so. Hey, can we move in maturity into this role, out of this role? Can we take responsibility for our people, for our faith, for the church? Next takeaway. Because of the love of God, grace is free. And it is not our job to punish others or ourselves. Number one, those people are probably already suffering. The people who you're mad at, who are living out their lives in ways that are not good, they are probably already suffering. That's a little side key for how to engage with others, is knowing that they're already suffering, and they're probably suffering even more than you know, and maybe even more than they know, right? And so we don't get to do the punishing, no matter how frustrated we are. We don't get to do the punishing of ourselves. We don't get to do the punishing of the other people. Because of who God is and the walk that we are called to and the redemptive work of Jesus, the punishing is done. God gets to handle things at the end of the world however he wants to handle them. But for us here and now, our job is grace, our job is healing, our job is love. Last takeaway. When we can set down our apathy, our people-pleasing, our effort to control, and our mediators, whom we love so much, we can encounter the living God. It is very hard to encounter the living God if we are filled with apathy. It is very hard to encounter the living God when we say, you can do it this way, and looking like this, and make sure it doesn't feel like when I was, in evangelical church, because that feels weird to me now, so make sure it feels different when we have this huge list of how we want to control God showing up. It is very hard to experience him when we put barriers in the way, because that's what a mediator is. He says, I will only experience God through this podcast, or through this person, or through this book. It is, again, very hard to encounter the living God. But if we can set those things aside and say, burn all of that, all I want is you, that's when God tends to show up. So we are going to pray. Whew, because this was a lot of preaching. This was a lot of storm. There's a lot of stuff for us to engage with. So I'm going to pray. We're going to sing a song about how God is always bringing beauty out of ashes. Sometimes he's bringing beauty out of the ashes of the stuff that we need to let go out of. Sometimes it's the ashes of our trauma, right, of them leaving Egypt. He built something new out of that darkness. Sometimes it's something new in our relationship with him. All the time, God's doing new things. Spring comes, Resurrection Sunday comes. It's always this reminder. So we're going to sing that song, and then we're going to split up into discussion. If you choose to stay, we're going to talk through these things, whatever stood out to us, stuff that we're wrestling with. So we're going to do that together. First, prayer. Oh, God, I thank you that you do not want a people who sits in the stadium and boos the people who are running and trying to engage with their community, engage with darkness, engage with the world. That would not be a life full of meaning and joy and purpose. We find all of those things. We find you when we are actually running the race, when we are trying to step into the things that you are calling us into, when we experience our identity as your people. Who doesn't need a mediator. A parent does not need a mediator to talk to their child. They just scoop them up in their arms. And so I pray that we'd be able to encounter you in that same way, that we'd be able to leave our telegraph machines, all the stuff that would pile up between us and you, that those things would fall away and that we would just get to encounter you. I pray that you would raise us up in maturity to be able to be caretakers for those around us, in strength and love, with a sense of justice all around, but being able to truth tell without extraction. So we need you, Lord. We need your Spirit, otherwise none of this is happening, and we're just going home and continuing to walk in the same way we always do. So I pray that you would encounter us here and leave us never the same. In your name, Jesus.